world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Hey everyone, it's your host Kate Byrne with Women Advancing. Have you ever walked out of a meeting or even a conversation asking yourself, did that really just happen? Did that conversation just take place? And it's on me? Today, I'm joined by someone who has spent her career naming the patterns most workplaces would rather ignore. Founder and managing partner of Haeggquist and Eck LLP, Alreen Haeggquist, is a powerhouse attorney, and she's a fierce advocate for employee rights, specializing in one of the most pervasive, misunderstood, and psychologically damaging issues in the workplace today, gaslighting. And here's the truth that most people don't realize. Gaslighting at work doesn't always look dramatic. More often, it's subtle, it's strategic, and it's designed to make brilliant, completely capable people question their own competence, their memories, and sometimes their sanity. As someone who's gone through this, I was hot to have this conversation. So Alreen and I dig right into what workplace gaslighting actually is and what it absolutely is not. What those early red flags people miss, often because they're conditioned to be a team player and nice, how gender, age, and power dynamics make gaslighting harder to name and even harder to prove, why self-doubt, is the gaslighter's greatest weapon, and how to reclaim trust in your own voice, and exactly when to document, speak up, or call a lawyer. There actually is a right time. And what leaders and HR folks must do to stop enabling toxic power structure. We've done a lot of talking about it. It's time to start really doing it. Finally, how to heal, truly heal, after you've been psychologically undermined at work. This is a masterclass in protecting your mental clarity, your emotional boundaries, and your professional rights. And as my recent podcast with Amira Barger was all about being nice, it's a reminder that nice is not the same as safe, and that harmony doesn't mean health. If you've ever felt talked over or talked down to or quietly dismantled by a boss, colleague, or a system, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Let's get into it and help you out. Welcome, Women Advancing listeners. So excited to dive into what I think, sadly, is such an important topic for us, and that has to do with gaslighting at work. Sadly, it happens still far too often. Knowing your boundaries, protecting and understanding your rights, and frankly, stepping up and just embracing your power. Who better to share so much wisdom behind each of these topics but our guest today? That is the founding and managing partner, Alreen Haeggquist of Haeggquist and Eck LLP. Alreen, thank you for agreeing to come on board and share the pearls with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to start. I'm going to just jump right on in because there's so much ground we have to cover and it's all relevant, incredibly so. Let's start with your aha moment. When you think about it, you've built this career fighting for people who've been silenced and undermined or dismissed, and often by those in power. So what drew you to this work in the first place? And what keeps you in it when the cases get hard? Because I would think, it might feel like, oh my gosh, are we making any traction?
Yeah. So for me, my aha moment was when I started my own process of healing. I was abused as a child. And when that came to fruition of dismissing my trauma anymore, dismissing my abuse anymore, but having the awareness that that happened to me and that's leading to the consequences that I was experiencing as an adult, that was one of the moments where I recognized, the things that happen to you leave lasting consequences. And even though you didn't create them, you have the ability to change the trajectory of where you go with. And that really is what keeps me motivated in doing the work I do. The work I do is I have a law firm. I represent women in cases of sexual harassment, retaliation, wrongful termination, gender discrimination. And I'm motivated to continue doing that work because I can see where they start from, which is this very hopeless and helpless place, and where they end up at the end of the case, feeling empowered and finding their voice. So when I realized power there is, once you realize you have the power in really changing a person's life to live their best life, keeps me going when the tough gets tough.
I've got to just say too, and I didn't spend time, but I wanted to acknowledge what you experienced at an early age. And I'm really sorry about that. That, shouldn't happen to anyone. It happens far, far too often. But I've got to say, and everyone knows, all my listeners know, I love alchemy, where you turn lead into gold. And in this case, just making this negative, which could have just completely devastated you forever and ever, amen. And instead saying, you know what, I'm going to make it better so that other people don't have to experience this. So I just really want to commend you and acknowledge that.
Thank you. Yeah, we didn't really touch on that too much, just for your listeners. Like, I came from an abusive home, like I said, and it was my father that was abusive in all the various ways, including being sexually abusive. And so what Kate's talking about is changing that, where that didn't define me. Right now, I'm taking something that happened to me and using it to help other people, because I know, one, the consequences that you suffer when you experience something like that. And then two, what's possible, when you start taking steps to heal yourself from what happened. And so changing that around. And that's really why I do the work I do, is I want women to feel really good about their place in the world, because they should. Something has just taken that from you, and just to get back to that place, because there's so much potential once you get there. So thank you for recognizing that and acknowledging it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of those things where I think, and this is a perfect example in this conversation and the work that you're doing, is that you actually have, eventually there is a way where you can and have the power to fill that gap or that hole, and or go in a whole different direction. And then it just opens you up. Sadly, it is often, the leaping point. It's just a shame that it has to kick off that way. Well, and then also think of all the generations you're impacting from present forward on from that moment, dismissing and canceling out that what was past ancestral, really toxic patterns.
Yeah, like even with my daughter right now with the Epstein files, she's a 13-year-old girl, asking what the Epstein files was. And I was explaining it to her. And then she's like, well, why don't the women that it happened to just say something? They did. Okay, well, why don't we just get the information from the internet? Well, it doesn't exist that way. And what it is, people still want some other proof. They don't just believe the person anymore. And so just having that conversation, and it makes me feel good, even though it's like, I'm sorry I've been having to have this conversation, but it makes me feel good, because for her, it's so foreign to think people wouldn't believe you when you said this horrible thing happened to you,
Of course.
And I hope that continues, where it is going to be so foreign to this next generation that it's not possible for somebody to make this stuff up.
It's so funny. I once had the opportunity, I was at it recently speaking, and I made reference to the imposter syndrome. And the young listener said, what's the imposter syndrome? And I thought, oh, may you never know what that is. Yeah. Right? It's a tender little window. Yeah. But before we go further, I always believe, words and definitions really matter. So would you mind defining it clearly, what is gaslighting at work?
I think what happens, it became like this new term that people started using, but gaslighting is just manipulation. Just think of gaslighting as manipulation. And it's manipulating you to think that your reality didn't happen, or it didn't happen the way that you're feeling like it happened. And people try to dismiss that. And so in the workplace, gaslighting comes up, or manipulation comes up, is when you report somebody, right? They engaged in bad behavior. He touched me, he harassed me. And the response is, oh no, he couldn't have done that, right? You look at, why would he ever do that to you? Or it could be in a situation where you report something and all of a sudden you're the worst employee that ever existed. And so now you have all these performance issues that you never knew about. Or they try to tell you, we take sexual harassment really seriously at the workplace, right? We have a zero tolerance policy. Anybody who engages in the conduct, will be terminated. Well, the person engages in the conduct and they're not terminated. And so that makes you believe it's not that bad, or the company does accept it, or their policies aren't true. And so is it a legal cause of action, right? Like, you can't sue somebody for gaslighting or manipulation, But in all of these types of cases, sexual harassment, retaliation, wrongful termination, gender discrimination, you see gaslighting occur as part of the defense in every single case. And so that's where it shows up. But when you think of the definition, I would just think of it as manipulation. And I think people understand a little bit more.
No, exactly. And it certainly is much more familiar. And one of the most frustrating things to me is that, you can't be fired for bad management. Bring it back. After the times I had people, when I would sit down and chat, and I was always told, well, this all may be true. And yes, clearly this is correct. But sadly, you can't fire someone for being a bad manager. And I thought, yeah, maybe you could if it's impacting performance and all your key people are leaving. But so to that end, what are some of the red flags? Are there some sort of subtle and often easy to miss signs that someone might be getting gaslit by a boss or a colleague or institution? I mean, is there a way people can tell the difference between, say, as you were just saying, tough feedback, performance reviews, and manipulative behavior, aside from just sort of timing?
Sure. So I think it's also what's being said, right? Mm-hmm. For example, like, hey, Kate, I saw that you didn't show up on time, these past 5 days, what can we do about it? Is something impacting, the reason you're coming in late? Versus, I can never rely upon you. You're not reliable. So many other people are more reliable than you. I can never count on you. And you're like, wait, where is that coming from? So one gives you really like objective, concrete details of how you didn't perform. And the other way is really to attack you and to undermine you without any ability to grow from it, right? Like that means nothing to you, that you're not reliable. That just makes you feel bad about yourself and question like your self-worth there.
Right. So one's more about the issue at hand. It's sort of ad hominem, if you will. It's about it, instead of one is the issue at hand versus it's a personal attack. And you're essentially, it's done and over. And it takes it to such a massive extreme. Do gender dynamics, play a role here? I mean, do they amplify gaslighting or make it harder to name and report? For instance,
because gaslighting, it feeds off a power imbalance. And when you have a power imbalance, there's more likely to have gaslighting. And so, women are also taught, in the way we grow up, is to be polite, don't rock the boat, don't make it bad, internalize things into like, well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I am the one to do it. So when somebody tells you you're not reliable, well, the boss is telling me I'm not reliable. I guess I'm not, right? Or the boss is telling me that I'm not smart enough and I can't do the job. Well, I guess that means I'm not. And I can't say anything to him because he's the boss and I have to listen. And so I think that's how it comes into play. There's already the power imbalance there. And working with power is telling you something that you have been believed that you're supposed to listen to and be polite and just take it. So I think that's how it plays a role. And the same thing when it comes up with like age and race, right? The young people are told to listen to their elders. Elders are frequently told they don't know what's happening, right? You don't know what's going on in the world. And so that comes into play. And then, with race, racial gaslighting, don't play the race card. Don't make don't make it a big deal. You're just seeing it the wrong way. I didn't mean it that way, right? Those are all forms of gaslighting, but they play a bigger role when you are a person of the opposite.
It's incredibly frustrating to also witness it and also be the subject of it, which I have. So, yeah, and you stated it. There comes a time when you hear it enough, right, that you do start to question yourself. And the reason why gaslighting even works in the first place is because it totally erodes your self-trust, right, which is infuriating. What advice or what should someone do when they actually find themselves starting to think, maybe I am the problem?
I think this applies for both when you're questioning whether you're the problem or even when you're having negative self-talk in your mind, right? You have to ask yourself, is that really true, right? I think we know by now, like what our voices tell us doesn't make it true. What we tell ourselves just because we're having the thought doesn't make it true. So you have to ask yourself, is it true? And, what evidence do you have of it? And I think then going back on prior email communications, right? Like, what did this person tell me before I reported the situation or before this moment? What did it look like before? What are my performance reviews? What have they been telling me about the performance? What have other people, said about this person now telling me I'm the problem? And then having like friends or colleagues to do that gut check with, right? Like, hey, this is what he said. What do you think? Where do you think this is coming from? And having somebody that you can confide in and trust really to check you.
Absolutely.
Evidence-based.
Well, yeah. And who also knows you so well so that they actually could be honest with you and say, well, a little bit on this, but absolutely this, absolutely not. And kind of course correct too. So that enables you to sort of see, as we just said, more the feedback piece. So I know with all of this, when you find yourself in this situation, incredibly important to know your rights legally and frankly, practically. So when should someone, document, speak up, or seek legal counsel?
Sure. So I think it's always important to keep things documented. Like when you're in a situation, it's better to kind of write down, even if it's just an email to yourself of what's going on, because usually there's a feeling that you're having, right? You're not feeling good about whatever situation is. So when you're having that feeling, whether it's a legal action or not, or whatever it may be, just make a note to yourself, right? Email it to yourself. I think it's the best way to document the situation. And then if you start seeing a pattern, like this keeps happening to me, then you might be time for you to report.
Yeah.
And I think knowing what your legal rights are, I think is always a good time. I don't think there's ever a bad time to know it. I do think knowing your legal rights is power, so that when you know what your rights are in the workplace, you go in with a lot more confidence of what's acceptable and what's not. And so I don't think there's any problem with getting an attorney or a workplace advocate to advise you on like what's appropriate and what's.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, but like, what are some of the most common mistakes people make when they finally say, okay, I am going to take action. I'm ready to go?
I don't know if there's common mistakes. I just think people let it fester for a really long time before they do anything. And that again goes back to, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to put their career on jeopardy. And so they take it for a lot longer, I think, than they should or need to. Whether you do it right away, right? When you do it right away, it's like, oh, you're just making this up. That's not how it was. And when you wait a long time, it's like they've been here for years and the same conduct had been going on forever and it's never been an issue. And now they're making it an issue for some other reason. So I guess my point is it doesn't matter when you bring it up, they're still going to like attack you for doing it at the time.
Right. Exactly. So get ready for that. It doesn't mean you're wrong, right?
You're wrong. But that's just how they descend these claims, is to attack you. And so I think you document it. And when you're not feeling good in your environment, find out why. Like, I was just reporting this manager, let's say harassing or being inappropriate, just the other day against somebody else. I just recorded it. And now all of a sudden, they told me that, I didn't make my sales goal, even though I did. Or now they're telling me I can't go on this business trip, even though it was planned forever. And so like, if you start noticing those patterns, you might then want to take it up to HR and be like, hey, this seems like it was retaliatory because this just happened, and let them investigate. And you're then putting it back on them to look into the situation.
Because I can imagine too, if one totally understand how uncomfortable it would be to bring it up. No one likes conflict.
Oh, and people are scared of losing their job, which I totally understand, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, you literally, this is how people get sick, because it becomes, your body just goes in, and that's why it's called dis-ease, because you're in this constant state of fight or flight and survival mode, which just totally does a number on your adrenals and all that cortisol.
You're not supposed to do that. Like, you're not supposed to have that effect when you go to work to make a living. Like, that's not how you're supposed to be showing up. So that's what I mean. It's like,
right.
People continue to dismiss it because they, want to keep the job. They don't want to rock the boat. And it's just, I think, realizing like, you don't have to go to work like that. That's not, you actually do have rights in the workplace. Employers do have to do certain things to make you feel safe and protected at work.
Yeah. And I think also this is another thing, is I can just imagine if you don't report something right away, I can just hear someone saying, well, what all of a sudden made you decide now was the time? You obviously have been fined. And, oh, look, now you have a note against you. Is that why? So I can see how it could be a very slippery slope.
All I'm saying is they do it regardless.
Yes, true.
And that's how they defend their claims, right? Like I always prep this with my clients, in every case, right? They first deny that it happened. That is the first line of defense. Nope, didn't happen. Don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. Then they are presented with evidence, right? There's the document or there's the email or there's a witness or whatever it may be. There's something where they can't deny it anymore. That denial isn't working. Well, they asked for it. They consented to it. They welcomed it. They wanted it, whatever it may be. And then the third line is always to attack your credibility. You're just making it up. You're out for a payday. You were going to retire anyways, and now you're looking for your retirement fund. You're just out to get this guy. You want to ruin his career. And so there's always going to be an attack on your credibility. And so I just think knowing that and that's just how they defend their claim. They don't ever just say, which is, hey, we could have done better, right? Like, and you see that in our world today, right? Like, if you could just acknowledge that that wasn't okay and you made a mistake or, you made a poor choice or you behaved inappropriately or whatever it may be, if you just acknowledge what you did and try to do better, I think that would change the dynamics of where we're at. But people don't do that. They just deny it and attack you.
No culpability. So you talked a little bit about, HR and such. So what can those empowered do to themselves recognize and stop gaslighting within their teams or their cultures?
I just think that with everything, even with all of our policies and behavior, it all has to come from leadership, right? Like leadership has to make us. So if the leaders believe it's important to build teams that aren't being manipulative or aren't gaslighting, then they can provide coaching, right? They can provide training because not everybody goes to management school, right? They become managers because of their circumstances or the situation. But if you don't care to learn how to be a manager, or the leaders who make, other people managers don't care about making sure they know how to do it and what to do and what's important in managing people, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So I just think that in cultures, if leadership thinks it's important and wants to change a culture, they can do it by coaching and training and for themselves and for their team.
Well, and of course, one of the things that makes this so difficult is multiple generations have different palates, right? For some groups, it is not a bother. It doesn't, to your point earlier, that's not a thing. That's not what I meant. That's not what I said. Oh, but it is. You know what I mean? So I can see how it is just such a big, huge, convoluted furball. So, all right.
That's the case, right? When people say, I didn't mean it that way, and you took it the wrong way, it's also, well, this is what it means. This is how it came across. This is how it makes me feel. This is why it's offensive. And if that other person can say, hey, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, and I won't do that again. And then they don't do it again. That's one thing. But you don't get to continue doing it and then tell the other person, oh, well, you're just reading too much into it. You're making a big deal out of it.
Yeah, you're being hypersensitive. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of being that open listening that I think all of us, both in personal and professional and external world life, could really, learn a great deal from, so that we can actually hear, because the truth of the matter is you can be wrong. You know what I mean? That's, hate to tell you, everybody, but you might be. So just keeping an open mind and an open heart. So as a leader then, how do I rebuild trust in a workplace after it's been broken like that? And I mean, that takes time and consistency. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, I always think you have to model it as well, right? So leadership also not only has to provide the training, but they have to model the behaviors. We were just talking about when a leader makes a mistake, they have to be able to acknowledge, like, hey, I'm sorry, I could have done better. I'll be more mindful of your feelings next time, or the circumstances, how this might come across. And so I think modeling behavior, because then they see it in action, not only, with that person, but how you interact with other members on your team. And I just think by modeling behavior, you can build the trust, with the people that are on your team.
Yeah. And just really doing what you say you're going to do. And I would also say, potentially, see something, say something. Or
bystander, mentality. Yeah. And I agree, but also the bystanders face that same thing, which is they're, scared of their job, or how are they taking it? So they also go through that same line of questioning.
So now let's say you're a person who has experienced the workplace gaslighting. and you're kind of, it's been acknowledged, and you're kind of getting ready to get back on the other, go on the other side of it. What are some ways that you can rebuild your confidence and voice? I would think, I'm going to say personally and professionally.
You just take small steps, right? Like, I think it's hard to know, it was just that environment, or just that people. And so now being in that another space or another environment and testing it out, using your voice, and it, reciprocated in the way it was before, right? Going back and like seeing how you're performing and what other people think of your performance, right, is another way to rebuild your trust. And then I always think having allies, right? Like friends, therapists, right? Like having a good therapist to help you work through some of those issues are all ways to rebuild.
And to have grace and compassion and patience, I would think, too, for others. Yes. Do you think, everything's so kind of right now, outside world, but also with which, what goes out in the world impacts, us personally, but also professionally. So within the workplace environment, are we at any kind of a turning point in how organizations handle psychological harm and power abuse? I feel like one step forward, 8 steps back sometimes.
We are on a podcast right now talking about gaslighting. I have to believe the world, right? Like this wasn't something that, we talked about when we entered the workforce, right? And so that's why people are having actual conversations about it and thinking about how is this showing up? How is this impacting my workplace? And so to me, I feel like workplaces and culture is changing by the sheer fact that we're acknowledging it and having conversation.
And giving it a name, which is a huge step forward. So what gives you hope about this whole next generation of employees? And then I'm going to say the generation of leaders as well.
I base it off of the children coming up, right? And seeing my daughter. So she gives me a lot of hope. And the fact that I'm having these conversations with her, she's entering the world with this knowledge already where I had to learn it, 20 to 30 years later. So she's entering it with these names, with how it looks like, with the awareness, with the acknowledgement, and also knowing like they don't want that in their workplace. So that gives me a lot of hope that they're having the conversations at a really early age where, I wasn't having it until I was a lot older. And them, like I said, kind of the example I gave you before, some of our behaviors of like, what? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't somebody believe her when she came forward and said this, So that's what gives me hope.
Well, so knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self about advice? Sure, because that's a classic question of mine, but also about trusting her gut.
Yeah, I tell myself that, and my daughter all the time, to trust her gut. But I think for me, for what I wish I would have known as my younger self is about therapy and not putting therapy in this negative box that if I go to therapy, I'm admitting something's wrong with me, as opposed to using therapy as a tool to kind of process, the vast amount of things that come at you on a daily basis, whether you experience, child abuse or sexual abuse or not. Just therapy isn't this like negative thing for people that are broken. Therapy is just another tool that people use to, better their place mentally in the world that we live in.
Absolutely. The sooner we get rid of the stigma around anything having to do with mental health, because to me, the irony with all of that is it takes such courage in the first place to even admit, right? There's an awful lot of humility and vulnerability in that. And then to take the time to really just address it finally, once and for all, head on, and to have that determination and tenacity to see it through. It's so imperative.
Yeah.
It puts the power back in the hands of the rightful owner.
So that's what I would tell my inner self. Therapy's a good thing. It's going to help you.
Use it. It can be your absolute best. Oh my gosh. Well, Alreen, thank you so much for, great advice. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I'd like to add. I feel like we touched on a lot of things. I appreciate you having a podcast and having me on.
It's my pleasure. And Women Advancing listeners, you got to know my KB takeaways, chock-a-block. Just saying, we're going to have Alreen's contact information in the blog. So do reach out to her if you have any other questions about any of this, or you have a friend who is experiencing some of this, because as we heard, best to jump on it right now. Get that power back in your hands. All right.
Yep.
Well, thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Until next time. Hey, everyone. Oh, my gosh. I hope you got as much out of that conversation regarding gaslighting as I did with Alreen Haeggquist. I will say really quickly, in synopsis, one, I've been a victim of it before it was even called gaslighting. And it's so important to understand the difference of what creates and what kind of situation feeds gaslighting. And it all starts with an environment where there's a huge imbalance of power. There's a cat and mouse lack of clarity and lack of transparency that takes place, hence that imbalance of power. And then when feedback is coming back or there are complaints, it's much more personal in nature, does not address and provide the issue at hand, and a motive perhaps shifting to another outcome. If you find yourself in this situation, first question you ought to ask yourself is, do I know this to be true? And start taking a look back and doing a little forensic audit, frankly, on connecting dots and situations and seeing, is there a pattern here? Was there something I did, or were there other things I did that led to this? Leaders, it is up to leaders to be the change you want the world to be, right? Make sure that you have regular check-ins. If you sense a shift in behavior and interaction, address it right away. For those who are feeling gaslit, you're better off to address it sooner than later. Otherwise, people will just say, well, you put up with it. Now what happened? You have much more leverage when you do. And lastly, therapy. Therapy is a tool to process that which we do not understand. Period. The end. That's what it is. There are no stigmas to it. And the sooner we all start supporting each other, where you need an objective shoulder, heart, ears to listen to the situation at hand, the better. So with that, I wish you a gaslight-free life. But in the event, I hope this has been helpful so you know how you can handle it. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Till next time.